Good afternoon, 7th graders. Hi, it's me, Mr. Stark. Today we're going to be taking a look at classification lab. We talked a little bit earlier about classification in that we group things together by some of their characteristics. Yes, we group things together by their characteristics. So we talked the other day, there were 5 kingdoms. Monera, Protiste, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. And under the kingdom, there are 33 phylum, there are classes, there are orders, there are families, there are genus and species, and varieties of different organisms. And then we talked about Carlos Linnaeus. He came up with binomial nomenclature, where you had a two-name naming system, a genus and a species name for each particular organism. So each time that you go farther down in this, each level that you go down in this sequence, there you come closer and closer and closer to specifically identifying each particular organism from every other organism on the planet. Now, I know that all kind of sounds a little bit confusing, but we're going to try and do a lab today with shapes, and that will help you. We're going to take shapes and we're going to break them into kingdoms and phylums and classes and see how we break them apart and get them more and more specific based on the characteristics that they exhibit, the different characteristics that each of the shapes exhibit. So I'm going to switch over to the lab. So in the lab here, it says if you were asked to classify objects, you would probably go group together those objects that have any certain characteristics in common. A scientist does the same thing when grouping or classifying living things. Living things are grouped according to certain likeness or similar characteristics. Each group may be then divided into subgroups. Each group and subgroup is given a name to help simplify the scientist's work. So, in the strategy, you're going to classify shapes. You're going to use the words kingdom, phylum, and class in your classifying system. And you're going to determine what characteristics you are using to make your classification. So, what characteristics are you using to group the shapes together? You'll need a piece of paper, 2 sheets, this one that I'm scrolling up and down. And you'll also need another one, which I will find right now. You'll also need the page that says shapes to cut out, and it looks like this. It has 13 different shapes on it. So the first thing that it asks us to do is to cut out the 13 shapes. I've already done that, and I'm just going to lay them out on the table in order. Number 1, number 2, 4, 13, 12, 6. So I've cut out the 13 shapes and I've put them on the board in order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and 13. Okay, if you look more closely at your papers, I can maybe move this in a little bit and give you a little bit of better look at it. First of all, it says so we have shape number 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11. This will represent your first group or your first kingdom. The second group down here, the second step, it says place shapes 1, 2, 5, 8, 12, and 13 into a second group or a second kingdom. So then it says keep the kingdom shapes on the same paper or in the same area, and further separate them into smaller groups. Place shapes 3, 4, 7, and 10 into one group. These will represent the first phylum. I'm doing that now. So, as it said, we took 3, 4, 7, and 10 and put them into one group. This will represent the first phylum. So, 3, 4, 7, and 10 are the first phylum. And then it says group 6 and 9 into another group, and that'll be a second phylum. And then put group shape 11 by itself, and that would be a third phylum. Okay, all of these phylums are under the first kingdom. Okay, so kingdom, phylum, okay, and then we'll do the next step. Then it says the phyla may be further subdivided by writing an identification letter on each one. Each subgroup will represent a class. So on shapes 3, 4, and 7, write the letter A. So on 3, 4, and 7, we have the letter A. And on shape 10, we have the letter B. These are classes. So we have all of these belong to the first kingdom. There are 1, 2, and 3 phylums in that kingdom. And within the first phylum, there are 2 classes of shapes there. Okay, so looking at this, these are all the whole kingdom. Every one of these has a notch in it. Okay, so we might call this kingdom the notches. Then we have further separations in that kingdom, so that the phylums are different types of shapes. So this might be the circles, and this might be the squares, or rectangles, and this would be the rhombus. So now, this is all this kingdom. Now, what will we say, what should we call this other kingdom over here? They don't have any notches. They have all kinds of different shapes, but they don't have any notches. So what would you call them? I might call them the no notches. Okay, so we have kingdom 1, which has the notches. We have kingdom 2 that do not have notches. There's no notches. We have within kingdom 1, we have phylum 1, which is the circles, phylum 2, which is the squares or rectangles, and phylum 3, which would be the rhombuses. And I hope I have that terminology for a six-sided figure or hexagon, oddly shaped thing like that. I hope I have that correct. I wouldn't want to say that wrong. So maybe one of you will correct me on that. And down here, then we have no notches. Okay. So now if I was going to take my second kingdom and break them into phylums like we did up here, let's say we have circles. So those circles would be here. And that's the only circle we have. We have a couple of squares here and another square here. And then we have the odd-shaped rhombuses over here and there. So we would have similar phylums here. This would be the circles, this would be the squares, and this would be the rhombuses here. So this would be phylum 1, phylum 2, phylum 3. They do not have any differentiating factors like they did over here with phylum 1. We had all circles, but we had the A's had single notches and B's had double notches. Okay, so that makes them a little bit different. Okay, so let's walk through the questions that we have on our thing. So how do the members of the first kingdom differ from the second kingdom? I would say that the first kingdom has notches and the second kingdom does not. What 2 names would you suggest? I would say the notches and the no notches. You can come up with your own answers if you want. Your own design, I'm just giving you a kind of a run through. Number 3, what characteristics do shapes 3, 4, and 7, and 10 have that make them different from 6, 9, and 11. So 3, 4, 7, and 10 are circles that make them different from 6, 9, and 11. Okay, how are 6 and 9 different from 11? These are 4-sided, these are 6-sided. If you had to use a name to describe the characteristics common to the first phylum, 3, 4, 7, and 10, what would be a suitable name? I would say that the circles with notches would probably be a suitable name. What would be the best, what name would best describe the second phylum? The squares with notches. And the third phylum? The rhombuses with notches. On the class level, what characteristics do shapes 3, 4, and 7 have that make them different from 10? They each have a single notch. 10 has 2 notches. What would best describe the class 3, 4, and 7? 3, 4, and 7. Circles with the single notch. And for 10, circles with the double notch. Okay, so hopefully when you go through and you do this yourself and follow this through, that this will be helpful in you knowing what to do. And what you'll want to do is you'll fill in those answers and submit the picture of both sides of this lab sheet, this one right here, with all the answers filled in. So submit this with this filled in, and submit this with the back side filled in. And if you want, you can submit a picture of your all your shapes laid out on the table. That would be awesome. Hope this is helpful. Hope that you gather some of the ideas behind classification in which you are using characteristics to help sort different shapes here. We do the same kind of thing with animals and organisms. There are different kinds of deer that live in the United States, but they're each their own little species because they have their own characteristics. So there are 5 common deer in the United States. They are the moose, the caribou, the reindeer, the mule deer, and the white-tailed deer. And there's even another species of there's a Cowie's deer, and then there's another one called the key deer down in Florida. Each one of those has their own characteristics. They're all deer, okay? They're all deer. They're all members of the same family, but they have different unique characteristics that break them down into their own genus and species name. So thanks. Have a great day, and have fun doing your lab.